Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. All of our episodes are also now on Apple Podcasts. Today, Chris and I will be going through the second round of the NBA playoffs. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well, man. Really excited to talk about this today. It's been, at least the Western Conference has been super intense. A couple great series in the West. Unfortunate endings for me, as I'm sure we'll discuss. But second round, some really good team. I would say all the really good teams are still in it. So I think it's gonna be very intense.
Yeah, it's definitely like the shortcoming of the NBA playoffs, I feel like, in comparison to like the NHL playoffs or like March Madness, where you don't have as many upsets, but it definitely makes like the second round and the conference finals a lot more entertaining than the other sports because, like you said, those good teams are still there. So even though the first round was somewhat disappointing just because we didn't have like a massive upset or anything like that, it was still really entertaining, like you said, at least in the Western Conference, which we'll get into here in a second, how the East was kind of lackadaisical there in the first round, but second round action so far has been really, really entertaining. So I think we'll jump in now, like I said, to the Eastern Conference. Just real briefly, we had, I think, 3 sweeps in the first round. There was the Heat swept the Pacers. It was kind of close, even though it was a sweep. The Raptors dominated the Nets 4-0 the entire series. The Celtics dominated the Sixers the whole series for the sweep, and then also it was the Bucks won in 5 games, but still the Magic pulled off a massive upset there in the first game, and then Milwaukee kind of coasted to the series victory the next 4 games. But did you have any like takeaways or any kind of surprises from really any of those Eastern Conference series? Like I said, weren't as entertaining as the Western Conference, obviously, but still, did you have any takeaways from that?
Definitely one of my big takeaways was just, it wasn't really a takeaway. It was just kind of, it kind of stunk that we didn't really get to see what the Sixers could be this year. Ben Simmons go down with the injury in the bubble, in the seeding games. They really just didn't have any chance against the Celtics, just completely outmatched. I think with Simmons, that series is a very different story. Maybe he covers Tatum, maybe he covers Jaylen Brown, somebody like that. They really needed that. His defensive presence and playmaking presence out there for sure. Because Embiid had a pretty good series. I think he's a pretty overrated player, but he definitely he showed out during the series. He stuffed the stat sheet. I just don't think it was enough. They really just didn't have the firepower around him. Tobias Harris had that scary injury, so don't want to hate on him too much. But he should be okay, no problem there. Just a really bad cut it looked like after that hard spill. But he really wasn't that great in the inside the bubble. He didn't really take over like I thought he would, especially after Simmons left. But like I said before, didn't really have much of a chance. Once your best player goes down, it's pretty hard to win anything in the bubble.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with Tobias because a lot of people kind of forget, but last season when he was with the Clippers, he was probably going to be an all-star had he not gotten traded to Philadelphia in the Western Conference. And I thought once Simmons went down that Tobias would be able to kind of regain that form that he had. And he had some moments here and there. Like you said, obviously that scary fall was probably the thing he'll most be remembered for, at least in this series. But I was overall really disappointed because he just couldn't make shots when he needed him to. He couldn't really make any open threes. It really kind of raises some questions, which we'll talk about Jimmy Butler, of course, here in a second when we talk about the Bucks Heat series. But Philadelphia opted to give Tobias the max extension over Jimmy Butler, mainly because of the locker room concerns probably. But when you look at how bad Tobias was, really for most of the season, he really doesn't have that alpha dog mentality. He's much better as like a fourth, fifth option on a really good team. And then you look at Jimmy Butler here, just absolutely dominating the Bucks, dominated the Pacers, is a real guy you can throw the ball to in the fourth. And that's really – Philadelphia was honest. They think they got blown out in one of those games. But the other 3 games against Boston, they were in the game. And I think if they had a guy like Jimmy Butler, they maybe even would have snuck out 1 or 2 victories. Because before, I thought Boston was going to win in 6. And I kind of was banking on Tobias to kind of maybe have that alpha dog mentality. And he just really didn't, which was really disappointing. Obviously, though, the process is kind of a failure now because Brett Brown got fired. What did you think about that firing?
I figured it was going to come for sure. I don't think he's a terrible coach by any stretch of the imagination. I think just he wasn't helped out by his roster construction. He didn't really add a good scheme to that, and it really just didn't seem like Simmons and Embiid fit, and he couldn't really coach them to fit. So, maybe somebody else comes in and gets the job done, but I do believe Brett Brown will get another job. I think he's a good enough coach to where he can find a home somewhere else. Just I mean, I think it was kind of a mutual failure. I mean, I don't think he did a great job with them, but I also don't think they did him any favors with the roster construction. I mean, signing Al Horford, that was a mistake. I mean,
Yes.
a blatant mistake. That's basically just throwing your money in the garbage because I'd rather. I mean, he obviously just did not fit with Embiid at all. I mean, he started running him mostly when Embiid came out and stuff during the. He was really not even on the floor as much as the rest of the starters during the playoffs, just because they can't pair him with Embiid. It just didn't work. So I mean, paying Horford that money just an absolute mistake of all mistakes. One of the worst signings in the previous offseason.
Yeah, everybody, even Josh Richardson too, I think was overall really disappointing, and that's who they got in like the sign and trade when they gave up Jimmy Butler. Really, Elton Brand, honestly, I'm not super impressed of him as the GM so far. And Brett Brown, I think he's a good coach, but I think he's more of like your friend than a coach, if that makes sense. And I think Embiid's kind of said just as much in his kind of postseason comments about how maybe Brett Brown wasn't the best coach. I think if they bring in a guy, maybe, I don't know, maybe like a Stan Van Gundy, a Jeff Van Gundy kind of guy who's just going to be really kind of maybe hard on him and be more of a coach than your friend, maybe that'll work. I don't know. A lot of question marks there for Philadelphia, and it's really kind of disappointing because they were a title contender heading into the season, and they had a really dismal regular season leading up to the bubble. And even going into the bubble, we talked about it on this show that we thought they were going to be maybe a dark horse title contender, and then they got swept out of the first round. Of course, Simmons got hurt, which kind of hurts their chances there, but still really, really disappointing. And it'll be really interesting to see where they go from here. Any other kind of series you wanted to touch on? I think Philadelphia's implosion was probably the most notable thing in the first round of the East, but anything else?
I mean, I know we don't have to get too far in depth because I know we're going to get really into the Heat. That was just a tough draw for the Pacers. I actually think they played really well. All four of those games were very intense, very good. I think both of those teams are actually constructed very similarly because I think Oladipo, while not as good as Butler, he plays a very similar role. I know he's coming off the injury and stuff. I think when he's healthy, he's pretty close to as good as Butler as a player. He just doesn't have that fourth quarter mentality quite yet, but he's a great two-way player. They got a guy, I mean, Bam Adebayo, Miles Turner. That was a really fun matchup to watch all series.
Yeah.
TJ Warren was a really good player as well. Malcolm Brogdon. Goran Dragic was a beast. Duncan Robinson had some moments. The former Michigan man, absolute sharpshooter from three. But I really just, my takeaway is just the Pacers, they fired the coach. I'm just blanking on his name right now. But Nate McMillan. I feel like he kind of got I feel like that was kind of a premature firing. I actually do like McMillan. He's had some really tough luck with injuries in the playoffs. I mean, Oladipo, I mean, he did play this year, but he also wasn't full strength. I think they should have given him another year. But I wouldn't count the Pacers out in any regard going into next season. I think they're going to be they're going to have another pretty good year, and maybe they can actually do something in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the sweep, I agree with you. The sweep kind of misrepresents how Indiana played in that series because I think they were really all four of those games. They easily could have won any of them. Just Miami just had more talent and was able to win. And as we mentioned before, Jimmy Butler was able to dominate there down the stretch. I kind of disagree with you, though. Nate McMillan, I think he is a good coach. I think he was like 4th in Coach of the Year voting this year. So he's a good coach. But he kind of reminds me of a guy like Mark Jackson's like the first guy that comes to mind, where he's like a really solid coach. And if you remember, Indiana was kind of in shambles there when he came in because Paul George had left and all that. And Nate McMillan, he's able to kind of get you to become a good team again, become a playoff team. But I don't think he's a coach that can get you to like the title contending state. Yeah. Kind of like Mark Jackson, where Golden State was in shambles. Mark Jackson comes in, gets Golden State into the playoffs, but then can't get him over the hump. They bring in Steve Kerr, and obviously they won, 3 championships and 5 trips to the finals or something like that. So I do kind of – I am hopeful for Indiana. I think if they bring in maybe a better coach, a more kind of – a guy that can get them to that next level, they could be maybe not a title favorite, but at least maybe a dark horse title contender. Because like you said – I really like Brogdon, and also they didn't even have Sabonis, who was an all-star this year too. Right. I think if Sabonis was there, that would have been a whole different series, honestly.
Sabonis was definitely the best player throughout the year. I mean, made the all-star team. With him added to a roster that was already pretty solid, I think that's what I'm saying. I think this team compares very well to a team like the Heat, where it's just basically a solid roster up and down with pretty good depth as well. So I think definitely a team not to count out for next year. And I do like the Pacers, so a little bit of bias there. I really want to see them succeed at some point. But I like not one of my absolute favorite teams
Yeah.
either. Not a crazy amount of bias, but at least a little bit to see them succeed. So I'm kind of wishing it into existence.
Yeah, I thought Miles Turner was impressive too, honestly. He impressed me.
He had a very good series.
He was a lot better than he played really for most of his career, honestly. He was really good. The other two series, though, I mean, Brooklyn lost. Who cares, right? I mean, this team.
Just a bunch of G Leaguers and guys that maybe will be on the bench next year. And then Karis LeVert, who's an absolute monster. Yes. The rest of the roster is just guys that are trying out for next year's team. You're bringing back DeAndre Jordan, Kyrie, KD. Yeah. It's going to be different.
They're going to be a title contender next year, and
100%.
Most of these players are not even going to be on the team or at least relevant on the team outside of LeVert, like you said. And then the Magic, I thought they played pretty well, honestly. They put up a good fight against Milwaukee. Obviously, they were the only Eastern Conference team that got eliminated in the first round to win a game. Vucevic, I always say his name wrong. Nikola, he was really good. Vuce or whatever. He was really good. And even Fultz, I thought was pretty good. I think if they got like another scorer, like a guy that you could just give the ball to and say, here, we need a bucket, I think they could be a pretty good team. Maybe a guy like Karis LeVert, maybe they make a trade with Brooklyn, bring him in there. Yeah, I don't know. I do think they're in the right direction, though. I think there is some potential there for them because they play really hard. They play good on defense. There's a potential for them to maybe not just be a 7-8 seed, maybe kind of get into that kind of Indiana range where they might make some noise, but most likely not, but still that's better than just an 8 seed.
Yeah, I want to touch up on the Magic a little bit as well. I mean, they were missing Aaron Gordon for the whole series as well. That's a guy I'm not crazy in love with him as an actual player. I think he actually made Drew's most overrated players list. I believe he was 10 on that list. Just go check that out for us. That was a really fun video to make. But Gordon's still a pretty good scorer. So, I mean, that definitely would have added a little bit of punch. But the way Vooch played the whole series, he was just an absolute monster, man. He proved himself to be one of the better centers in this league. Is a guy that I've kind of questioned whether or not he can really handle the A load, the top guy load. And he carried the freight for them. Yeah. I mean, Terrence Ross was solid throughout the year. That's a guy I actually do really like too. I think he's a really solid player. He provides a ton of scoring punch off the bench. One of the best 6 men in the league. DJ Augustine, another guy that was kind of interesting this year. Kind of a little resurgent for him, especially in the bubble. He was very solid. Yeah. And then Markelle Fultz kind of trying to rejuvenate his career. I mean, I think they got a lot of guys on this team that could be good. I mean, if somebody really takes the next step, I mean, Vooch kind of proved if he can bring that into the next year, this might be a dangerous team, like Drew said. I think they could compete, or at least even if they're still a 7 seed, they could be a dangerous 7 seed that could possibly set a top seed.
They really just need that alpha dog, like I said. If they have because they got a ton of really good role playing talent. Even Vooch, I think, on a really good team, he's probably the second option, even though he played really good. If they get a clear-cut number one offensive option who can still play a little defense, I think they could be a really dangerous team next year. But I think we spent enough time here talking about the first-round matchups. Let's get into the second-round matchup. The first one we're going to talk about is right here, the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Miami Heat. Yeah. So I just got to get something off my chest here real quick. I hate how the NBA does this, where it's like they start the second round before the first round's done. So like tonight, for example, they were recording game 2, I believe, or game 3, of Boston-Toronto is happening, and also game 1 of Clippers-Nuggets is happening. So it just makes things very confusing. I can understand the rest reasons, but it just makes things confusing. It makes doing episodes like this nearly impossible when you got Eastern Conference Series are already well underway, and the Western Conference Series aren't even done yet. So at the time we're recording this episode, the Heat are somehow up 2-0 on the arguably one of the best teams of all time in terms of regular season success, the Milwaukee Bucks. The Heat dominated game 1, and were really dominant. And then game 2, they won somewhat controversially. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that game. But overall, what are your thoughts so far on this series? And maybe like kind of what did you think leading into the series, what was going to happen? And then what's maybe kind of surprised you? Obviously, I mean, the 4 seed's up 2-0 on the number 1 seed. So it's something had to shock you at least a little bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one would expect the Miami Heat to come out and win the first 2 games against the which is arguably the best or second best roster in the entire NBA, in my opinion. I think this is easily one of the most complete rosters in the Milwaukee Bucks. But so far, I mean, I've really been surprised. I mean, maybe not surprised, but further kind of convincing me that Giannis is an overrated player. I think he is overrated. I don't think he can do it himself. I really think he needs a second star to get it done. I don't think he's this unbelievably like just absolute otherworldly talent. I think he's obviously a very good player. There's no arguing that he's an elite player. He's in the probably in my top 5 still, but you really this is a kind of series where it's been the same way every single year in the playoffs. Whenever they run into a good team, they just cannot handle the defense, especially the Heat. The Heat are a very good defensive team. I'm not no shade on the Heat. This is a team that they should beat. I mean, if you're a team that wins the most games in the regular season, you should absolutely beat teams like the Miami Heat in the playoffs. You need to do this is a team you need to beat to get to the NBA Finals and win a championship. But so far, Butler has proven himself. He's been the best player in the series so far. Absolutely, not even close. But Giannis just I really just don't think he stepped up to the plate. I mean, people can make excuse about how his supporting cast wasn't that good in game 2, and that he didn't get enough shots up in game 1. I really just don't want to hear it, man. I mean, if you're the best player, if you're the MVP in the league, you shouldn't put up 18 in the first game. You shouldn't even. I mean, 28 is nothing special either for a guy that averages 30 a game. I mean, it's a little bit underwhelming. It really is. I mean, you should be playing your best basketball in the playoffs if you're the MVP. And I'm kind of sick of the excuses for him. I mean, maybe they come back in this series, maybe they don't. But if they don't, I mean, I think you got to start having the conversation that he's not a championship level player without another superstar.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I know there was a lot of talk yesterday. I think Richard Jefferson put a tweet out that said Giannis might be more of a Pippen than an MJ, and I think that's right on the nose there. I mean, we saw last year when Giannis plays a team that is either of equal level talent-wise or maybe slightly below or slightly better, he just kind of collapses and he gets out of his rhythm, doesn't take his shots. Honestly, I mean, why isn't he taking Jimmy Butler on defense? I know he said, oh, whatever, that's what my coach wants me to do, which that's a whole different discussion about Coach Bud. He might be on the hot seat here. I know he's probably going to win the Coach of the Year again, but I mean, we saw this with Atlanta. They had, and we're seeing it again with Milwaukee. He has tremendous regular seasons as a coach. And then once we get to the playoffs, he can't make the necessary adjustments to get his team to get his team to even to the finals. And I think he's been very fortunate to have very talented rosters where even like the Orlando series, like where Milwaukee did not they didn't impress me. I mean, it was very much, I mean, Orlando was in those games, and if Milwaukee was really as talented and as great of a team as they tend to think they are, I mean, you got to just dominate Orlando, and they really did it. I know they won by like 15 points in all their wins or around there, but they just didn't. And a lot of that falls on Coach Bud. A lot of that falls on the star of Giannis. And honestly, I mean, it's time to start just shortening up these rotations. I mean, I don't need to see Pat Connaughton or Dante DiVincenzo out there all the time. Even Kyle Korver. I mean, he's been pretty non-existent. Just leave Giannis out there, leave Middleton out there, who I still think is extremely overrated. I know he had a decent game too yesterday, but
he hasn't been that great in the playoffs so far.
Honestly, like,
a little underwhelming.
What's the difference between Chris Middleton and Duncan Robinson outside of $30 million? Like, let's just be real. Like, Chris Middleton is just not impressed me, especially how much money you're paying him. And he's I think as Giannis might not be a number 1 on a championship team, he might be more of a number 2. I think that's how Chris Middleton is. I don't think he's a number 2 on a championship team, but I think he can be a really good number 3 for a championship team. I think they just need another guy in there. But at the same time, I mean, the talent's there. Like you said, they're better than Miami. They should beat Miami. They shouldn't be down 2-0. And really, I want to hear your thoughts on game 2 as well, because that was kind of a controversial ending. But really, Milwaukee should not have even had a shot to win that game, if we're being honest. Miami choked down the stretch, and Miami played better than Milwaukee for like the first 3.5 quarters of that game easily. So that's really scary. I'm really scary if you're a Milwaukee fan because if you lose, if you made the conference finals last year and everybody was like, okay, that's cool. That was their first big run. They're going to be a title contender next year. But if you don't even get out of the second round, and after playing in the first round against Orlando and not looking super impressive, I mean, there's some serious question marks there. And I don't think Giannis gets traded or anything like that, but I definitely could see a coaching change happen, which is kind of surreal considering Coach Bud has been in the Coach of the Year conversation for now 2 years in a row, and he might be out of a job here.
Yeah, I've actually seen some rumors that during the bubble, there's been some non-secretive secrets about Giannis getting traded to either Toronto or I believe the other destination was Boston. It was two. It was definitely two playoff teams in the East that he could get traded to or just leave to go to, I guess. So I mean that's definitely an interesting thought. I mean you never know. Maybe they tear it down, try to build something else back up. But I mean I think this is Giannis. Honestly, in his entire career, I know he's still got a lot of years left. I mean he probably hasn't even hit his prime yet. But Giannis, I really believe this has got to be one of his best chances to win a title.
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to get a supermax deal where he's getting paid even more money somewhere else, or he stays in Milwaukee. The rosters aren't going to be as good around him. I mean, say what you want about Middleton, he's still a very good player. I mean, there's no arguing that. I mean, the guy averages over 20 a game. He's definitely good enough to be. I mean, maybe not a second option like you said, but definitely a third option. Then you add Eric Bledsoe, Brook Lopez, who have also both been very solid this year. I mean, not crazy good, but they both are very solid players. And then I also like their bench a lot too. So, I mean, I don't know if it's going to get that much better for Giannis around a supporting cast. Maybe he joins the team like the LeBron and AD, which is just two absolute beasts and then a bunch of absolute bums. Maybe something like that somewhere else. I mean, it's very possible, but I really just I don't know. I think the Bucks. This is do or die for the Bucks. This is game 3. This is basically their season. I mean, if they go on 3-0. Series is over.
Yeah.
I think the hopeful, maybe not dynasty, but the hopeful championship run for the Bucks, I think that window might close as well.
Yeah, and honestly, in the entirety of the bubble, they just really have not impressed me at all. Like even in the 8-game lead-ups, they just don't. I don't know. I feel like what happened was because basically the in between the shutdown and the start of the bubble was kind of like an off season, and I feel like the other teams kind of caught up to the Bucks, worked on their games, and caught up to the Bucks, and the Bucks were kind of just complacent, like, oh well, we were the best team in the league, so we're just going to be the best team in the league again once we restart, and that's just not the case. I think everyone kind of caught up to them, figured out what they're doing, and it's not going to end well in my opinion. And I wish we would have talked about Miami more a little bit here, real quick, because they've looked really, really good. And I don't want to kind of discredit them for how bad Milwaukee's looked, because in my opinion, Miami has probably been the second consistently best team in the bubble since the restart. And what I mean by that is at their peak, I don't think Miami's as good as Milwaukee or any of the LA teams, but I feel like they bring it consistently every single night, and they're really, really good. The best team that I think is like that, we'll talk about here in our next series, because I'm really high on that other team. But Miami, I think it brings it every single night. Jimmy Butler has been a superstar, like we said earlier. Duncan Robinson. Goran Dragic is like the Phoenix Suns Goran that made an All-NBA team, was an all-star. Like he's looked amazing. Jay Crowder is good. Bam Adebayo is good. I mean, honestly, I don't want to say Miami's going to win the finals or anything like that crazy, but I definitely could see them winning the Eastern Conference for sure, because they play really well, both sides of the ball. They have the star. They have all the pieces around him. They have a really good coach who has won 2 championships in the past. A lot of people forget about Spoelstra. He won both those championships with LeBron. And I think I really like Miami. I really, really like them. And I think they could make some serious noise here. I mean, they haven't lost a game yet in the playoffs. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. I think this is a complete roster. I actually disagree with you. I think this is a team that could surprise people and end up winning the ship. I absolutely could see it. The way they've been playing, they've been the best team, honestly, in the playoffs, in my opinion. I think they played the absolute best of anybody. Maybe there's one other team, I believe it's the same team we're both thinking of, that you can argue. But I really believe the Heat have played better. I mean, this other team that we're about to get into, I think they've played better teams and still dominated them. So I'm really, really, like, I'm starting to believe in the Miami Heat. I really am. I mean, I didn't really believe in them being a finals contender going into the bubble, but the way they've played is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, you look at guys like Bam Adebayo, who's been just an absolute monster. Jimmy Butler, obviously, but he literally has been easily a top 5 player in the bubble so far. Maybe even more than that. I mean, I'd take his clutch buckets over even guys that are scoring more points than him. So, I mean, and then you look at, like you already said, Goran Dragic's been an absolute monster. Duncan Robinson just splashes threes. Jay Crowder hasn't been any slouch. He hasn't been any problem with them. And they actually have a very good rookie backup point guard, Kendrick Nunn, back in rotation as well. That's big for them. I think he's an excellent player who provides a lot of scoring punch off the bench and could easily be a starting point guard in this league. And he was for part of the year and was very good.
even Kelly Olynyk and who am I forgetting? Kelly Olynyk's given. Oh, Andre Iguodala. That's the guy I was going to say. Andre. Both of them have been
Giving them
really
good minutes.
Giving good
Quality
minutes
for those guys.
So yeah, they've been really impressive, and I'm just out on the Bucks. Like I know they haven't won a championship since the '70s with Kareem, but they're just super unlikable in my opinion. Like Giannis used to be super likable, and now he's just kind of like just whines about everything. Yeah, and Miami's the underdog team, but I thought you were going to talk me out of maybe thinking Miami's a championship contender, but you're just talking me more into that. So
I don't like it, man. It could happen. You never know. They're very good defensively.
I thought Milwaukee originally was going to win this series in 7, but just after watching these first 2 games, I think Miami's going to win this series in 6. I really do. I think even if Milwaukee wins Game 3, I think Miami will win Game 4 and they'll be up 3-1. And obviously, Denver just came back from a 3-1 deficit we've seen in the past, but still, I think this Miami team, they're not going to blow a 3-1 lead. They got the culture there to kind of make sure they move on and finish the team off. So I think we can move on to our next series here. Did you want to give any like final prediction? It sounds like you're leaning towards the Heat winning the series, right?
Yeah, I'm going Heat 4-1. I really do. I don't think the Bucks. I think the Bucks maybe they win Game 3, but then I think the Heat just come back and just absolutely dominate the rest of the series. I could even see it being a sweep. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
The series is over. The way that they have played against Giannis and the way that the Heat have shot the ball. They're the best by percentage. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the bubble. It's going to be really tough to come back from the Bucks. I mean, if you really look at the Heat, I don't think this is even an unbelievable upset because you look at like they have the perfect storm to beat better teams. I mean, they're a very good defensive team and they shoot the 3 ball well. I mean, that's all you need to make a finals run, and I think they're going to do it. I really do. I think this is the team that could easily get to the finals.
Man, if they get swept, I don't know what Milwaukee's going to do because they gotta make some serious moves there for sure. Because you can't be the best team in the regular season and then just get swept. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. That's a bold take there, Chris. That's a hot take. But we're going to do our next series here. The Toronto Raptors and Boston Celtics. Again, this is also the lower seed is up on the top seed. Currently at the time of recording, this number 3 Celtics are up 2-0 on the number 2 seeded Raptors. The Celtics, I know it probably wasn't too big a surprise, but they were the team that I was kind of referring to as being consistently the best team in the bubble, at least that I've watched. It seems like they just bring it every single game. They're kind of like the improved version of Miami, if you will, because they don't just have one legit alpha dog option like Jimmy Butler for Miami. They got Tatum, they got Kemba Walker, they got Jaylen Brown, they even got Gordon Hayward if he can hopefully come back from his ankle injury if they make it to the conference finals. They're also really, really good on defense. They're really good in offense. Marcus Smart became the second incarnation of
Steph Curry.
Ray Allen or Steph Curry there in Game 2. He hit like 5 threes in a row. It was insane.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
And Toronto, I mean, they got some serious question marks. But I don't know, which team do you want to start off with?
I'm actually going to start off with the Raptors because I kind of want to touch up on the question marks. They looked, I mean, playing the Nets, everybody looks dominant, but they looked so good against the Nets, man. I felt like I was extremely impressed with the way guys like Freddie VanVleet, Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka especially was an absolute monster. Pascal, OG. I mean, the whole crew was playing absolutely great basketball, I would say. I mean, I actually thought they were going to come into this series and kind of take over early on, but it really just hasn't happened. I'll go ahead and, I mean, my prediction was Raptors in 6. I really thought they were going to dominate.
Wow.
It still happened. They could win 4 straight. I mean, maybe they get hot and play like they did in the first round, but the way the Celtics have played, I really think it's going to be an uphill climb for the Raptors here. I've definitely changed my opinion. I believe Celtics will win 4-2 in the series, and I think the real key difference maker is not Gordon Hayward. I actually believe it's Kemba Walker. He's been playing out of his mind so far since the playoffs have started. I mean, a guy that was coming off some serious knee problems and has been kind of in and out, banged up. Maybe not a great first year in terms of regular season for Walker after they paid him, but you look at how he's played in the playoffs, and he's been the difference maker for me. I mean, the guy's been making clutch shots left and right, and he kind of took over in the Sixers series, and he's kind of just continue that message. I mean, Tatum obviously is the guy everyone's going to talk about. He's a great player, but he's been pretty consistently great too. I mean, it's the difference between. I mean, he's been good all year, so I mean, but Kemba has been. I mean, he's taken it up another level in the playoffs. So I mean, it's going to be tough to beat the Celtics for sure. The way they've been playing as a unit, and the way Kemba Walker in particular has been playing. So he's definitely the guy I'd like to highlight as the key to whether the Celtics make a deep run or lose this series to the Raptors if he kind of falls off.
Yeah, as of right now, Boston, I think, is my Eastern Conference championship pick, and I think they have a legitimate shot at winning the NBA Finals. They've been, like I said, the best team in the bubble for really the entire both the playoffs and also the 8-game lead up. They've been really, really good. The only issue they might run into is they just don't have the size to maybe compete with even a Miami team who has some decent size, but especially if they make it to the finals and play a Lakers or a Clippers. That's the one kind of concern. But even like Tice has given them some good minutes. Robert Williams has been okay as well, getting some good energy off the bench. But yeah, when you got the three-headed monster of Tatum, Brown, and Kemba Walker, he didn't even have a great game too either. He just really was good there in the fourth quarter, had that awesome step back. And I think I said Boston in 7, and I think I'm sticking with that pick because I just believe in the championship pedigree of Toronto. I believe in Nick Nurse. And honestly, they should have won game 2. I mean, if Marcus Smart doesn't absolutely lose his mind in the fourth quarter, Toronto probably wins game 2. I mean, they outplayed them for the first 3 quarters, in my opinion, at least.
I believe they did as well.
But Boston like I said, they have those alpha dogs that can close the game out and get you a win. And that is kind of concerning for Toronto because I know going back to our bubble predictions episode, you're really high on Siakam, but I got to be honest, he is just not – he didn't impress me the second half of the regular season before the pandemic, and he really has not impressed me at all in the bubble. I mean, he's a decent player, but we talked about Giannis might be more of a Pippen than an MJ. I think Siakam is definitely more of a Pippen than an MJ. I mean, you can't just give him the ball and just expect him to be Kawhi Leonard like Kawhi was last year for the Raptors when they won the championship. I mean, he's not looked great. He kind of disappears. And same thing with Fred VanVleet too. I mean, he was really good, I thought, before the playoffs started, but he just can't make a shot now. And if he can make some shots, if Siakam can play a little bit better, maybe they have a chance to win this series and come back. But like we said, at the time, the day we're recording, game 3 of the series is tonight. And it's a must-win game for Toronto because if they go down 3-0, even if they go down 2-1, I mean, it's still an uphill battle. But they need to win this game. I'm confident they can, but they're going to do it by committee. They don't have that alpha guy, but they have a lot of solid players. They kind of remind me of a slightly less talented version of the 03-04 Pistons, where they didn't really have that one super-duper guy, but they had a ton of solid guys. And they really just need – I mean, Kyle Lowry's been decent, but like Marcus Gasol has been awful. Norman Powell has at least not been good in this series. He was really good against Brooklyn, though. And I already mentioned Siakam and VanVleet have struggled. But if they can kind of heal their woes there and be better, I think they have a chance to come back from the 2-0 deficit. But Boston looks really, really good, and I'm definitely concerned. It's not like DEFCON 3 for Toronto if it would be for Milwaukee, because obviously they won a championship last year. And I know for me personally, I did not think they would be this good this year. I did not think they'd be number 2 seed because they lost Kawhi. But you can really see that they're missing Kawhi, because especially in that fourth quarter, they didn't have a guy you can just give him the ball and just score. They didn't have that guy.
Yeah, then that's where I think a guy like Kyle Lowry differs from a player like Chris Paul, which I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit later. He's not that fourth quarter killer that everybody believes. Some people believe he is. I don't, because that's why I don't think he's up in the elite tier of point guards. But kind of touching up on just how the Raptors have played throughout the series. I mean, Siakam, Lowry, VanVleet missed more than 10 shots and shot well below 50% in game 2. So, I mean, I'm definitely not willing to count them out yet because I think they can play a lot better. But if you look at literally Siakam is, I believe he's 11 for 32 from the floor. He's made a single 3-pointer in 2 games. And Lowry hasn't been much better, man. I mean, 10 for 28 from the floor. That's not, I don't even get me started about VanVleet. He's been throwing up bricks all series so far. I mean, 3 for 16 in game 1 and then 8 for 22 in game 2. Neither one was particularly impressive, but I really believe with their deep roster, they can still turn the series around. I think they need to win these next 2, tie it up at 2, but this is absolutely not an impossibility. I think the Raptors could easily turn this series around very quickly. And I do agree that Siakam has not been impressive He was pretty good in the first round, but it was against the Nets. Like I said, it didn't really. I mean, you could throw Norman Powell out there and he would have dropped 35.
He
I mean,
did. He was really good. He was really good that series.
he was really good. He's a solid player. But that's what I'm saying. Like you could throw any guy into that role and he would have dropped a bunch of points on the Nets. But this is just a different animal. The Celtics playing very good basketball right now. Tatum, Walker, Brown, like we were saying. I mean, they've gotten some key contribution from Smart on the offensive end, which is that's a big help when he's knocking down threes from everywhere. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the rest of the series goes. But I think the Raptors, do not count them out yet. They need to win Game 3. If they do, the series is a whole new ballgame. If they don't, series is over.
Yeah, this series should be 1-1 because Toronto, I thought, was the better team Game 2, aside from the fourth quarter. If they can fix that late, because even Van Vliet, I know I just trashed on him, but he was actually pretty good the first half of Game 2. He just couldn't shoot the ball at all in the second half, and they just had nobody score. And the problem with Boston is they're also a really good defense, and they have enough offense to overcome Toronto's really, really good defense as well. So I don't think they're out of the series. That's why I still have Boston in 7, because Toronto has a championship pedigree. But overall, I think Boston just looks really, really good. And I think even if Milwaukee, don't want to go back to that series, but even if Milwaukee does pull off an upset or is able to come back against Miami, I still think Boston's probably going to beat them anyway, regardless, and make the finals. So I'm really high on this Boston team, and they're just super fun to watch. They do kind of remind me of a March Madness team. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they have Gordon Hayward, Kemba Walker, and Brad Stevens, a bunch of Cinderella March Madness stories, but I don't know. I just love watching them play.
They're very fun to watch for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Very excited to see what they can do if they get to the conference finals or the NBA finals. I'm very excited to see what they can do.
Before we jump into the Western Conference, so I just realized we did not talk about the Game 2 of the Miami Milwaukee series, that ending, that controversial ending. We didn't talk about it there, so let's talk about it real quick here. So in case you missed it, basically what happened was there was a controversial foul against Chris Middleton with the Bucks down 3. Middleton hits all 3 free throws, ties the game. Then there was a controversial call against Milwaukee. Giannis kind of touched Butler. Wasn't that hard of a foul, but they called it, and Butler hit 2 free throws with zeros on the clock to win the game. So I just want to hear, what did you think about that call? I know Twitter was losing their mind saying, hey, this is ridiculous. I tend to agree, but I do think that both calls were very soft, so they kind of canceled each other out, and Miami won the game. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, on the Giannis foul to end the game, I mean, it wasn't anything egregious. I mean, he touched him, but that's a very common, the follow through where he kind of brushes up against them it's a pretty common no call in that situation. I'm very surprised that it was called, just because I feel like the refs. I mean, while I'm not calling for any like insane bias towards the Bucks. They're the better team. They're the team like. It would probably be better for the NBA to see them in the finals over a team like the Heat. So I'm surprised they would call like a more of a ticky-tack call, like a call that doesn't get made every time. That's not very consistent. I'm very surprised that was made on that end of the floor, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It was. Giannis is a superstar, and typically superstars don't get called for ticky-tack fouls. Just look at LeBron.
Especially right at the end of the game to lose them the game. Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more.
I thought the foul against Miami, though, when Middleton like leaned into him and Goran was straight up and didn't move his feet. That was kind of a brutal call too, in my opinion. So that's why I'm not too upset, even though I am definitely rooting for Miami. I'm not too upset because I feel like they kind of cancel each other out. But the refs, we talked about this before, they do need to improve a little bit. I feel like they are not the best in the playoffs and in the bubble, but there's just it evens out. So I think and Miami was the better team in the whole series, or the whole game. So I think they deserve to win. But I want to talk about that real quick before we jump into the Western Conference. So now we're jumping to the Western Conference. These first round matchups were a lot more interesting than in the East. Obviously, we had 2 Game 7s, which I know you're really excited to talk about, with the Denver-Utah series and the OKC-Houston series. And then also even the Denver-Clippers series. Of course, Clippers kind of dominated games 5 and 6 to win in 6 games. That had some really entertaining moments as well. I mean, even the Lakers-Blazers series, even the Lakers 1 and 5, also was very entertaining. So what is like your biggest takeaway? What are you going to remember the most from the Western Conference first round?
Well, I think my top takeaway is that the Thunder, their future is extremely bright. That's my top takeaway from the first round. I mean, who thought that we'd be talking about the Oklahoma City Thunder almost knocking off the Houston Rockets? I thought the Thunder would be one of the worst teams in basketball. I thought they're going to be a team that they
Yeah,
absolutely could not compete for a playoff spot, and here they are. I mean, you just look at how good Chris Paul still is in his career. I mean, before the season, I thought he was just an expiring contract. Now I
yeah.
think. Resign.
I didn't even think Chris Paul was going to play a game for OKC. I thought they were going to trade him before the season started. I thought they were going to be
Yeah,
awful.
but he's been unbelievable. He's been he was better than Westbrook the whole series. I mean, I know Westbrook coming off the injury too, but I mean, Chris Paul clearly has been one of the best point guards in the NBA all year, and actually deserve. I know, absolutely not calling him for him to win it, but he deserves some MVP love. That's why I for sure think he's in that conversation. I know his stats aren't going to be as high, but you look at how well he led this team, which I still do not believe is an unbelievably talented roster around him. I know I love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but I want to talk about him as well after this. He's some work to do, but I don't think that he's taking some elite talent roster. I think he's making these players a lot better than they actually are, which is like I don't think Steven Adams is anything special at the offensive end or defensive end as a player. I think he's a very mediocre center, but looks better with Chris Paul there. So I mean, that's my top takeaway. It's mostly focused on Chris Paul, how good he's been. But it's very sad to see. It's kind of where I want to start, just because I'm so sad to see the Rockets move on, man. I absolutely hate it. I'm so upset that the Thunder couldn't move on. I know they wouldn't have done anything in the second round. Probably would have gotten swept, but it would have been nice to see them get in.
Yeah, I mean, I have my Rockets jersey on, but I was rooting for OKC. I am more of a Thunder fan, but I still like Houston. I will say, though, if you're Houston and if you're a Houston fan, you got to be a little nervous considering the fact you gave up a ton of first-round picks to get Russell Westbrook, and then you almost lose to the team that you sold the first-round picks for and you went all in. That's got to be very concerning. And even if, I mean, Chris Paul, I mean, he's old, so he's not the long-term option there in OKC, but they have so many picks and they already have so much talent. I mean, Dennis Schroeder isn't super old. He's an elite sixth man option.
Very solid player.
Yeah, he's probably going to win the sixth man of the year this year, most likely. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you kind of touched on it there. It was pretty non-existent this series. I was pretty disappointed by his effort and his play overall. But he's still only a second year, super young, going to be a star in this league for sure. And then, as I said, they had so many draft picks. They could trade a Chris Paul. They could trade a Gallo. They could trade maybe Steven Adams and get even more picks. But they just have and even Lou Dort. We didn't even mention Lou Dort, who was amazing. I think I saw
KD's reincarnation in Game 7.
Yeah,
real.
I think I saw a stat that said he joined like LeBron and Kobe as like it was something about like 30 points in the Game 7 or whatever, and it was like him, LeBron, and Kobe, and it was nuts. It was insane.
He had the most points scored in a Game 7 for any undrafted player as well. Out of State, wasn't drafted. Obviously, Thunder took a chance on him. He's going to be on this roster for a long time. I mean, I'm not claiming he's some awesome offensive player, but even if he averaged 1 point a game, his defense is absolutely fantastic. He did a great job on Harden in Game 7 and throughout the series. He's a player to watch for the future for this team, a player that they kind of just pulled out of nowhere, and another reason why this team was better than they were advertised. I mean, no one's really talking about Lou Dort, especially before Game 7. They're like, oh, yeah, he's just another player. Even maybe a little bit of a meme because I didn't think he was anything offensively. Averaged like 5 points a game. But you really saw how good of a defensive prowess he has. I mean, it's an absolute lockdown offender. Going to be a household name in terms of his defense for a very long time, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was really, really good. And I love how hard he works. He's such a scrappy player. You don't see too many guys like that in the NBA that just work hard and give 125% every single possession.
He's an undrafted player. He's got it. He got that chip on his shoulder, and he's proven that he's much more valuable than an undrafted player. But I didn't really get into it. You kind of touched up on it. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a player I believe has an extremely high ceiling as what he can be as an NBA player. But if you watch him play, it almost looks like he plays in slow motion. To be honest. I mean, sometimes it's good because he looks very controlled while he's on the court. But there's a difference between controlled and just coasting through a game, and that's how he looked like he played through most of the series. I know he had I believe Game 2 he was on fire in Game 2. I believe. I believe
he had a big 3 too in Game 7. He had a big 3 in Game 7.
He had a clutch 3 at the end, But if you're a player of his talent, which I believe he is, I think he's a very good player and almost as good. I believe he's almost as good as Chris Paul. I know he's not a point guard, but I believe he is a borderline elite shooting guard. I actually think he's an absolute stud of a player all around. But you can't be coasting through a playoff series like that. That definitely puts some of my hype for his future in question. But I think he's still really young. I mean, the moment looked a little too big for him, but I think he's back next year and future years. And I think he takes over this alpha dog role, maybe pairs with another star in a couple years besides Chris Paul, and they move on with all these awesome draft picks that they're going to have. So I'm Thunder fans, definitely don't be maybe be a little down that you're not moving on, but don't be down about the future. This is a team that has a lot of years where they can be starting to compete for championships, and this was a team that was supposed to be rebuilding going into this year after losing Russ and Paul George, and look where they are right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing with house money right now. I mean, they did not expect to make the playoffs. They definitely probably didn't expect to reach a Game 7 against Houston, the team that was supposedly going all in, and the reason that they acquired Russell Westbrook from them. But I was really disappointed that they lost, but still, great series, great season for OKC. A lot to look forward to if you're a Thunder fan, for sure. I also just want to touch on real quick the other Game 7 that happened. Not as entertaining, I would say, as the OKC Houston Game 7, but overall, the entire series was way more entertaining. The Denver Utah series with Donovan Mitchell just going off, Jamal Murray going off, Jokic being really good, especially there in Game 7. He was really like him and Gobert, for some reason, were the only two offensive guys that on either team that were playing really well. I know you're a big Donovan Mitchell fan, and I know you were really sad to see Utah lose. But what are your kind of thoughts on that series, real quick?
I'm so devastated that the Jazz could not move on, and they were one of my favorite teams going into this year. I thought they were going to make some real noise, and I believe they did. I think that I think they're a massive underdog in this series, especially without what is his name, Bogdanovich?
Yeah. Bojan. Bogdan's on the Kings.
Right. He's an absolutely fantastic scorer, and they missed his presence in that game. I believe this series would have gone very differently had he been in the game. He's an absolute 3-point marksman and a guy that he averaged 20 a game during the regular season, a guy that fit on this team pretty well. Not having him throughout the series definitely hurt, but Donovan Mitchell proved why he is a superstar player, and he will get paid like a superstar this offseason. They're already talking about a supermax contract, rookie supermax deal for an absolutely outstanding player. I am extremely excited. I think Mitchell takes the next step next year and plays more like he did in the playoffs. I know throughout his career, I mean, maybe people are kind of saying he's overrated. He hasn't really his numbers haven't gotten insanely better since he joined the league. He's been basically at the same 23 points a game, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, same efficiency throughout the first 3 years. But I think he really took over that killer elite role, superstar role, going into next year, and I'm very excited to see what he can do. I think his ceiling as a player is the best shooting guard in the NBA. I mean, if you count Luka as a shooting guard, that's fine as well. But Donovan Mitchell, I think he belongs in that conversation, in the back end of that conversation as an elite shooting guard and just an absolutely lethal scorer on offense. But they need to help him for sure. They need to offer some help, and I think Bogdanovich definitely contributes to some of that. But I mean, you look at guys like Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley. I mean, Conley was coming back from the injury as well. Clarkson was solid this year. If they can retain him, this is a team to watch for the future for sure. But I mean, congratulations to the Nuggets. Not a team that I really like that much, but Jamal Murray was a flamethrower for most of that series. I know he had a couple games where he was throwing up bricks, but Jokic in Game 7 was able to make up for that with easily his best game of the series, in my opinion. I think he was an absolute monster in Game 7. While the offense was struggling for both teams, he was kind of the standout player on either team. I believe he dropped 30 in the game and was pretty efficient too.
I agree with everything you just said. I don't really have a whole lot else to add. I think the Jazz, they need to add another kind of offensive weapon to Donovan Mitchell, but I think he really took that next step that I think a lot of people were wanting to see from him in this playoffs. I think he's going to carry that into next season. And I think Utah is going to be a dangerous team. Obviously, the Western Conference is stacked, and it's really going to be hard to beat either of the LA teams here for at least this season and next season. But Mitchell's still super young, and Utah's going to be, if they lock him up here, which all reports say they're going to very, very soon, they're going to be a really dangerous team here for however long Donovan Mitchell's on their team. And really good defensively, but I said they just need a little more offensive help. But
yeah,
Just really quick, too, I also want to talk about Portland. Obviously, they just kind of ran out of steam there down the stretch. I think they were just really tired from the gauntlet they ran just to make the playoffs. They won game one really impressively, but then they kind of just ran out of steam there. Obviously, Lillard got hurt. And then real quick, too, Luka was that game 4, I think it was. The buzzer beater was easily the moment of the bubble so far. It was an amazing shot. He really, really proved that to me at least, I knew he was one of my overrated players in our overrated episode. He really proved to me that he is legit. He is really good. And I think Dallas is a dark horse title contender next year for sure. If they can improve defensively a little bit, I think they could really give. I mean, they gave the Clippers a run. They pushed the Clippers to 6 games this year. I think if Kristaps can stay healthy, maybe they get another really good option, even though their offense is good. They just need a little help on defense. I think they could legit be a title contender next year for sure.
It's tough with them, really quick to talk about that. It's tough to claim them as title contenders for me because I really just don't think that roster around Luka and Kristaps is that fantastic. I know Tim Hardaway is all right, but besides that, it's a collection of like bench players and G League stars, I guess. I don't think Trey Burke is that good. I know they were missing Jalen Brunson for the year too. That definitely impacted a little bit. So I think he's a pretty solid. He's a pretty good role playing starter, I guess, if that makes sense. Definitely a guy that I like. So that would make a difference. And Kristaps, he has to prove that he can stay healthy on it. I felt like I was seeing him. He was a game time decision in every single game in the bubble and in the playoffs. I didn't know whether or not he was going to play in any single game, but once the injury at the end of the year, hopefully he can come back and regain some of that form he was getting going into the bubble and in the bubble. I think he played very well and was a great second option to Luka's awesomeness pretty much throughout the bubble. I think the sky's the limit for Luka. I think he could be the best player in this entire league when it's all said and done. He's that good. People forget the guy's only 21. The dude's got probably 18 years left of basketball to play. He's playing basketball until we are in our mid-30s, maybe even later on. And that's crazy to think about. The dude's one of the younger players in the entire league, and he's already, in my opinion, a borderline top 5 player. So I think that's incredible for him. And then, I mean, there's not really much to talk about with the Lakers Blazers series. Like you said, perfectly said, when they just kind of ran out of steam. I believe Lillard, I mean, the injuries definitely hindered his ability to really dominate like he did throughout the season. But the way the Lakers played him with the double was very smart as well. Let everybody else beat you and then kind of try to shut down Lillard. It worked for most of the series. The rest of the players around him didn't really step up. I thought Melo, I mean, it was fun to watch him kind of play well in the last game, but when it really mattered in the games they needed him to, he didn't really show up for me. And same with McCollum. I know he was dealing with the back injury. Didn't really have his best series either. But I am excited to see what they do in the offseason because, I mean, it's time to figure out whether or not this is a championship contending team, which I believe they could be with the right pieces. But, I mean, I really don't know at this point. They've had chances. I love the Blazers. I love Lillard. But is he really that player that you can build around to win a championship? I'm starting to have my doubts. I mean, I love him as a player. I think he's a player, no doubt. But my bias can only carry me so far. Is he the guy that you can build a championship team around? And so far, the answer's been no, but I believe it could change.
Yeah, I think that's what the difference between Dallas and Portland is that they're in very similar spots. I think if both make the right moves, they could kind of reach that as a title contender year in and year out. But I think the difference is I just personally have more confidence in Luka being that guy that can carry a team to the finals than I do with a Lillard. And I don't know why. I just feel like maybe the age thing, maybe because Portland's been there before and we've seen it more with Lillard not being able to carry the team, or can carry the team to like the conference finals but can't beat a superior team like the Warriors. And I just have more confidence that Luka, especially because how young he is, like you said, he'll be able to do that eventually. If Dallas makes the right moves, like I said before, they're really good offensively though. I know you kind of aren't super high on Hardaway or Trey Burke, but they had really good series, I felt like. And they're really good offensive options, but they just need to add more defense, I feel like. And Kristaps has to stay healthy as well. I mean, that's if he keeps getting these ticky-tack injuries that make him lose not be able to play in a series or for most of the regular season, it doesn't matter how good he is when he's on the court. If he can't stay on the court, it doesn't even matter. So
I agree with you.
So that's the big takeaways from the first round of the Western Conference. As I said before, it was a lot more entertaining than the East for sure. But now we'll jump into the second round. So these will actually be able to make legit predictions because at the time that we're recording, no game ones in the Western Conference have happened. This game one will be tomorrow, which is going to be Friday, between the number 1 seed Los Angeles Lakers and the number 4 seeded Houston Rockets. We talked about the Rockets a little bit. We were talking about their first round series against the Thunder. But Chris, what are your predictions for this series? What are your thoughts going into it?
It's as simple as this, man. Lakers in 4. I'm going very chalky.
Oh my!
The
Wow.
Rockets have absolutely no chance to win a single game. I don't know who's covering AD. I don't know who's covering LeBron. I mean, I know their defense wasn't bad against the Thunder. Thunder.
It's the best in the bubble.
Yeah, I mean the Lakers and they really got their defense right. I know they lost game 1 of that series and Lillard had the injury, but they really got their defense right in that entire series. I thought like they played a really good job on Lillard and the rest of the Blazers team. I think the Rockets have a pretty similar structure with the 2 main guards and then kind of decent scorers around them and not a craziest I mean, I know the Blazers had Whiteside, but whatever about him. I mean, I think Nurk and the bigs on the Rockets can be handled kind of similarly. So I see the Lakers just absolutely dominating this series. I think LeBron has a monster series. I think Harden's first round struggles continue in the second round and Westbrook as well. I think this is a very one-sided series. I'm going chalk, but maybe bold as well. Lakers in 4.
Yeah, that's pretty bold, and I'm going to disagree with you there. I think I have Lakers in 6. I think the Rockets are going to win 2 games, and I know people are going to say I'm biased because I'm wearing my James Harden jersey right now, but I swear I'm not a big Rockets fan, but I can honestly see a roadmap where the Rockets could potentially maybe win this series. I mean, if you get a monster game from Harden, a monster game from Westbrook, and then a game where both of them go off, and then a game where everybody just hits a ton of threes, and we've seen that happen before with Houston, they could potentially, if they win all 4 of those games, they could win the series. And I think the Lakers, as impressive as they looked against Portland, they really haven't impressed me a whole lot in the bubble. Defensively, offensively, I'm not as concerned about them as I am with the Bucks because the Bucks are just kind of look like a mess at the moment. But the Lakers, they're kind of in that same boat where I feel like they became almost a little complacent, if that's the right word, and maybe some teams caught up to them in that kind of lead up to the bubble before the playoffs. So I'm kind of concerned with Los Angeles, but at the same time, I completely agree with you. I mean, PJ Tucker can probably guard LeBron, but then who's going to guard Anthony Davis? I mean, the size, the small ball Rockets, it's really going to come back to haunt them. I was surprised that Steven Adams didn't have more of an impact against them in OKC because I do think he's a quality big man. But the fact of the matter is, though, Anthony Davis is obviously way better than Steven Adams on both sides of the ball, and I think he's frustrated because he didn't win the Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of that stuff's going on at the moment because Giannis won it over him. I think he's going to have a monster series. I really do. I think PJ Tucker will be able to limit LeBron enough. But Anthony Davis, unless you're going to throw Tyson Chandler, and what is he, like 38 years old now? Who's going to guard Anthony Davis? There's just nobody.
I mean, are you throwing small forward Robert Covington on him? No, you're not.
I mean,
6'8", he's not going to cover AD.
You probably have to. I mean, who else are they going to put on him?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They might cover him, but he's not going to actually get covered because I think I see AD averaging over 40 a game throughout the series. I'm going bold. I think he's going to have as much. I was actually
unless he gets injured.
Yeah, that could definitely happen. But game 1, he really struggled against the Blazers. But after that, he was the best player in that series. The dude went absolutely nuclear. No one could cover him. And I felt like Nurk and Whiteside were actually okay matchups for him. And they still dropped like 40 a game. So I'm expecting the same thing in this series. And I really don't think they have a single guy that can even close to match up with him. And you can't double either one of him or LeBron because the other one will just dominate. And LeBron could easily score 40 a game too if he's left single covered with no help. He's going to do the same thing. So, I mean, I think the Rockets are in a no-win situation here. Yeah, they're going to put up some points. Yeah, they'll probably be fun to watch and keep most of the games close. But I think really the bottom line, when it really comes down to it, AD is going to take over when the game matters most. He needs to prove that he is a clutch scorer, though. I know that's like one knock. The one knock I really have on AD is that he really hasn't proven it when the spotlight's on, like it was in game 1, in my opinion. The dude was 8 for 24. Nothing special there. for sure. But I think he kind of proves it this series and shows everybody why he's one of the better players in this league, one of the best players in this league.
Obviously Mike D'Antoni is a good coach, and he knows more about this stuff than I do because he's obviously a lot better at it than I am. But I do think potentially what Houston could do is they could put PJ Tucker, Anthony Davis, and I don't think Anthony Davis is still going to get his points, but I don't think that's awful. And then you can put a Jeff Green or Robert Covington, maybe split time on LeBron. And I think they could limit them enough. And then, I mean, Harden's shown that he can be a good defender when need be. Westbrook has always been a decent defender. If they can limit the outside options and say, okay, LeBron, AD, you can each score 40 points a game, but we're going to score, hit a bunch of threes, score a bunch of points. And even though the Lakers and completely limit the other options, the Caldwell Popes, the Greens, the Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee's, Caruso, all those guys. If they can completely limit those guys, say LeBron, AD, get yours, but we're going to shoot a bunch of threes, score a bunch of points, and still win. I mean, that could happen, right? I mean, we've seen in the past, the Lakers, they have not been able to hit some shots sometimes. They do kind of tend to kind of fall asleep in some games and become a little lackadaisical. Sorry, but I completely disagree that the Lakers are going to sweep. I mean, the Rockets, there's easily going to be a game where the Lakers just don't show up and the Rockets score like a bunch of points and hit a bunch of threes. So that they're at least going to lose in 5. And I think there is a roadmap where the Rockets pull off an amazing upset in this series. Again, I'm going Lakers in 6. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's possible. There's a chance of it happening. I'm not as dead set the Lakers are just going to wipe the floor with the Rockets. I think the Lakers, like we said before with the Heat, where they bring it every single night, the Lakers kind of just do enough to win the game. And I think these are going to be really close games for the most part. We saw with the Portland series, outside of I think it was the one game where it was kind of a blowout. The other games,
Game 4 were both absolute blowouts. The other 3 were solid. Yeah,
the other games, they kind of let Portland hang around even when Lillard was out. So I think it's going to be a close series. Ultimately, I think Lakers are going to win in 6. But I'm sorry, I just don't agree with your sweep take. I'm not getting the brooms out for this series for sure.
Oh, I think you'll be getting them out real quick after they go up. They take that quick 2-0 lead. Neither one of these teams. These are 2 of my least favorite teams in the league. So I really don't care what happens in this series. I want it both to lose, frankly, but it's not going to happen. That's why I was hoping I could at least root for the Thunder. I know they wouldn't have won the series, and they would have also. I would have predicted them to get swept as well. At least I could have rooted for that. I hate the Rockets even more than I hate the Lakers. So I really I want to see both teams lose. Maybe that happens. But I guess we'll see. Going to be an interesting year. I'm still very excited to watch. While I don't like either team, I'm very excited to watch this matchup. The small ball versus the Anthony Davis basically is the matchup that I'm looking to see.
Yeah, it's going to be an entertaining series, even if it is a sweep, which I don't think it's going to be. But even if it is a sweep, I still think it's going to be. They're going to be close games because, the Lakers are going to let the Rockets hang around. And again, it's not likely, but it is possible the Rockets could pull off a massive upset here. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, we'll definitely see for sure. It's going to be extremely interesting.
So let's jump in to the last series here. The Los Angeles Clippers, number 2 seed versus the number 3 seed Denver Nuggets. Again, you briefly talked about the Nuggets before, but they came back from a 3-1 deficit. People were writing them off, calling them the most overrated team in the NBA, a choker, all this stuff. And then they came back from a 3-1 deficit and showed some flashes of the team that I feel like we've been wanting the Nuggets to be for the last, what feels like 3 or 4 years. And then the Clippers, obviously, they're just kind of in chill mode all the time. They let the Mavericks kind of hang around in the early part of the series. Then after Luka hit the massive shot, they really dominated both Games 5 and Game 6. Game 6 was kind of close, but they really just blew Dallas out of the water in Game 5. So again, I go back to with the Lakers. I think this is going to be a close series because the Clippers are kind of like the Lakers in that they kind of just coast in the games. They don't bring it every single game. It feels like that they're going to let you hang around a little bit, especially if Paul George continues to struggle, even though he did have a decent end to the series against Dallas. But what are your thoughts heading into the series, and maybe what's your prediction?
I mean, the Clippers should win this series easily if Paul George is playing up to par, but I don't think he's going to play up to par. So I'm expecting this to be a close series. I will predict Clippers in 6 as my final line here. I'm not going to be as bold because I do think Paul George has a couple. He has a couple big games. He has some bad games as well. He's definitely the X factor in this series for me, as well as Jamal Murray. I mean, if he can bring that shooting, which I don't believe he will. I don't think he's that good of a player, as he did make both of me and Drew's overrated list, which I don't think he would be on there anymore. But he's definitely in that consideration for me still. I'm not going to just write off the first 3-4 years of his career just because of 3 or 4 really, really good games. I'm not going to do that. That would be outlandish. But Clippers, I think, will win the series basically just because they have Kawhi. It's pretty chalk. Nothing really crazy about that. They have both teams have very good depth, and I mean have a lot of talent on the offensive and defensive end. But I think the difference maker is going to be the fact that the Clippers have Kawhi. He's not going to let them lose this series. There's no way it happens. I would say absolutely carry them through him and Lou Will were the 2 best players on the team. Lou Will is very solid as well. But for the most part, Kawhi brought the energy every game, played a very consistent 38-5 every single game like he does throughout the regular season. And I think that will continue through this round. They will win handedly, but it will still be – most games will be close. But I think the Clippers won't really be scared by the Nuggets, even though the Nuggets will win too.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. My prediction is also going to be Clippers in 6. But I mean, the big X factor is going to be Jamal Murray. I mean, if he can be the 50-point-a-game guy that he showed in stretches against Utah, I mean, I think Denver has a legitimate shot at winning this series. But it's just the inconsistency is always there. I mean, we even saw in Game 7. I mean,
he was awful.
He was not good. I mean, he had a few big shots there down the stretch. But for the most part, he was pretty non-existent after having an amazing Game 6. And we saw that pretty much throughout the series. I mean, he went off Game 1, then disappeared for 3 games, and then finally got better. So if he could be more consistent, and I think Jokic, he didn't have an amazing series, but he had a really good Game 7, and he was kind of steady, I felt like. If he can maybe get a little bit better, if they can get a little more outside help from Gary Harris, who missed pretty much the entirety of the Jazz series, Michael Porter Jr., if he can just play some sort of defense, because his defense was absolutely atrocious, and he got played off the floor.
In the NBA, he's horrible defensively.
He just doesn't even try. Like, I remember with my basketball coaches, it was like 95% of defense is just effort, and he just stands there and doesn't even do anything. It's like if he just went like this, like put his hands out, he would stay on the floor, and Denver would be so much better of a team because he offers so much on the offensive end.
Great offense.
Defensively, he just stands there like this with his shoulders down, and it's like, dude, what? Try, man. And then he's like, oh, why are you taking me out, coach? It's like, because you're not playing any defense, Michael, for God's sake. But anyway, he's got to get a little bit better. Torrey Craig, I think he's a decent player. I mean, they got the depth, and I feel like the potential is there for Denver, right? We've been talking about for years, like I said, it feels like.
Same conversation every year, man.
About their potential. And maybe overcoming the 3-1 deficit. I mean, myself included, I think everybody wrote them off like, oh, they're just done. And then they came back. They showed a lot of grit, a lot of grind. Maybe that can, set something off in their heads that, hey, we can do this. And maybe they pull off a massive upset against the Clippers. I definitely can see I feel like it's more likely that Denver can upset the Clippers than Houston can upset with the Lakers. It's still not possible. It's still not likely. It is possible. It's still not likely, though. That's why ultimately I have Clippers in 6 as well. But I think this is going to be a really tight series. The Clippers, they, again, just haven't looked great really the entirety of the season. I mean, when they bring it, they're really, really good. But they're just like Kawhi, I feel like, is the only consistent player on their team, right? Lou Williams, when he's not getting wings at strip clubs, he's a decent player, I guess. But even then, he can kind of have game off. Same with Harrell. And I just, Paul George, obviously, he's just, sometimes he can be really, really good. Other times he can just be non-existent. And then he's calling people out on social media and yelling at people. So I don't know. Clippers are going to keep the Nuggets in this series just because they don't bring their effort game in and game out. But ultimately, I think the Clippers, they're going to have enough because they are, in my opinion, the most talented team in the NBA. And that's going to be enough to get over the Nuggets. But I definitely think the Nuggets are going to give them a run for their money for sure.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're going to have to bring it this series. They need to bring that we see. I mean, Kawhi, he I really don't even think he has been at his maximum effort that I've seen him at. I mean, at least on the defensive end, he's still been great defensively, but he has just an absolutely a knack for just turning it on when it matters most. I mean, I don't. This is why the dude's got 2 finals in 2 appearances, I believe, or no, 2 and 3 appearances. He had 2 with the Spurs.
Yeah.
I think he's going to make it 3 or 4. I believe this is going to be your finals champion. But just looking at the rest of this roster, this should be a team that absolutely dominates on paper with Paul George, with the rest of the surrounding talent. This is not a roster like the Lakers where it's a bunch of scrubs with Paul George and Kawhi. This is a roster with a complete talent all around. I mean, Reggie Jackson, say what you want about him. I hated him on the Pistons.
He's been pretty good.
Third string point guard, and he's actually been solid in the bubble as well. But that's what I'm saying. This is a very deep roster. I mean, Reggie Jackson could start on some teams and be a very good 6-man. On this team, I mean, throughout the regular season, he was like the 11th guy. So very complete roster here. I really think this is their title to lose still. But we'll see, I guess. I mean, the Lakers, they're gonna do everything they can to win as well, but I just don't think they have the firepower. And Clippers, I think they overcome the Nuggets and then win it all.
Yeah, I would probably say the Clippers are probably my championship favorites still. I'd probably say it goes Clippers, Lakers, Celtics are probably the top 3 for me at the moment. I think the Denver, though, I just really hope that because I like their team. I like Jokic. I like Jamal Murray. I'd really love them to succeed. I would love for them to pull off an upset here because I really dislike the Clippers, especially after the whole Marcus Morris, Montrez versus Luka stuff. I mean, that was kind of dirty and cheap in my opinion. Him stepping on his ankle, all that crap. So I really don't like the Clippers or the Lakers. So I would love for a Nuggets or a Rockets to sneak into the conference final just so I have somebody to root for. But at the same time, I really just don't. I don't know. It's possible, like I keep saying, but it's highly unlikely, and that's why we both have the Clippers in 6.
Yep.
But
I agree.
Yeah, so that's a breakdown of all the 4 series, as well as a brief first round recap. Do you have any final thoughts, any final hot takes you want to get off your chest?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, the bubble has been so far pretty much a success in terms of games, and I'm really excited to watch the rest of the games are only going to get better, and that has me very excited.
Yeah, even if the Clippers and Lakers make it to the conference finals, which is highly likely, it's still going to be an amazing game, even though I don't like both those teams because they're both really, really good. You know, LeBron's going to bring it. You at least know Kawhi is going to bring it. Paul George, I don't know. Maybe he'll bring it, maybe not. But I'm really high, though, on the Celtics and the Heat. They could surprise some teams here and win the championship for sure. But yeah, that concludes this episode of Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Spotify and Twitter, and search us on Apple Podcasts. We've done a ton of different episodes, mainly NFL. We did a bunch of divisional breakdowns. We're also going to start a weekly series here once the NFL season starts, where we do pick'ems as well as some fantasy picks. So definitely be on the lookout for those. Those will be a weekly upload. And we'll also probably do a similar episode to this one once the second round is done for kind of a preview for the conference finals, and then also a preview for the NBA finals when that time comes as well. But check out all those episodes if you haven't already. But thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.